scene, both north of the primary fence and secondary fence. A Border Patrol canine team was on the scene, and that agent's canine detected a hole just about a few yards north of the secondary fence here. The agent peered down in the hole, saw an individual in there who requested his help, said he was stuck. Agent immediately contacted our dispatcher, who notified the San Diego Fire Department and paramedics. Chula Vista Fire Department also responded. That agent, with the assistance of others, was able to dig around and help to remove that person from the hole. By that time, paramedics and the fire department arrived. They took over the scene and started making that hole larger. And all this occurred about 2 hours later, at about 10 after 1. So these individuals were in this approximately 100-yard tunnel for about 2 hours. It's about 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet wide. It's an old gas line, so there was some concrete in there. They did say there was water in there as well, where they had to hold their head above the water to breathe. And it was just a very narrow passageway, very difficult for them to make their way through.
And you said all of them are okay, all 5 people were checked out, they're being processed right now. Tell me about, obviously we can assume that this was some sort of illegal entry. Explain what they told you about that they were possibly making payments to make this possible.
Well, this is an organized smuggling event. We have confirmed that. An individual said they did make arrangements to pay $5,000 to be smuggled into the country by this manner. Again, this just shows the disregard for the human safety and life that these criminal smuggling organizations have. To submit somebody to that, to have them crawling through this, and it was not even a wide enough passageway for them to get through. So the people were very scared. They couldn't get by each other. They couldn't back up. So even though it got that narrow, they had to keep going forward. The people that were evaluated, none of them required any additional medical attention, so they have been cleared, and there's still an ongoing investigation.
And what happens to them now?
Well, we'll try to identify if the person involved with the smuggling event who arranged, if he's part of the people we apprehended. We always want to press criminal charges to go against anybody that we find involved with something like this. If there are no other, if they don't have any other criminal history, those people that are being processed, they could possibly be voluntarily returned to Mexico.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us live. We appreciate it, Michael Jimenez. And we are live here along the border again.
Observed entering a manhole about 5 yards south of the primary international border fence. And another 6 individuals were observed standing nearby. They didn't go into the tunnel. Agents in the area responded to the scene, and a Border Patrol canine team who was north of the secondary fence, that agent's dog alerted to the hole, so that's how we discovered the hole. When the agent peered down inside, he saw an individual who requested his help. That person was stuck, couldn't get out of that hole. The agent contacted our dispatcher and San Diego Fire Department. Chula Vista Fire Department also responded to the scene. But the agent, with the assistance of others, was able to dig around a bit to help pull that first person out.
This started at around 11 o'clock last night and went on for about 2 hours, is that right?
That's correct. It was about 10 after 1. That hole is just so narrow that they couldn't crawl through. They had to pretty much shimmy through, and it was very scary for them. There was also water in that hole. They said they had to hold their head above the water level so they could breathe. So it was a very scary experience.
How are they doing?
They've been evaluated. They've been cleared. None required any extensive medical attention. None had to go to the hospital. But again, it shows just the disregard for human life and the safety that these smuggling organizations have. We have interviewed them. One person did say that they did pay $5,000 to be smuggled in by this manner. So it is an organized smuggling event.
All right, and are we seeing a decrease or an increase of this sort of thing?
Well, since we've made our land border more secure, we've seen an increase in tunneling activity in San Diego sector. Prior to this tunnel, we had 41 tunnels that have been detected, cross-border tunnels, which have been used for smuggling people or contraband. So it is something that we've seen a rise in.
Was it just people, or were there drugs as well?
At this time, it seems like it was just people being smuggled in.
Okay, and what happens to those individuals, those 5 people?
We always will interview people, try to determine who was involved, who was responsible for the smuggling event. If we have that foot guide or person in here in the group, then we will proceed with criminal charges to process that person for alien smuggling. If these people don't have any outstanding warrants themselves or any other criminal proceedings aren't warranted, then they could be voluntarily returned to Mexico.
All right, thank you for talking to us this morning. Thank you for keeping us safe. And we're just looking at Doug. We need you to say and spell your first and last name.
Michael Jimenez, Jimenez.
What happened?
At approximately 11:15 last night, agents in the area observed 5 individuals enter a manhole about 5 yards south of the primary border fence international boundary. and another 6 individuals were observed standing outside that manhole. They didn't go in. Agents responded to the area looking both north of the primary fence and north of this secondary fence, which is just south of me. A Border Patrol canine team was in the area north of this secondary fence, and that agent's dog responded, alerted to a hole. And when the agent peered inside that hole, he saw one individual who was asking him for help. He said he was stuck and couldn't get out. The agent notified our dispatcher, who contacted San Diego Fire Department, Chula Vista Fire Department, and paramedics were also contacted. So that agent, with the assistance of others, was able to dig around the individual and extricate him. By that time, paramedics and fire department arrived on the scene and took over the scene. They dug some more out and were able to remove the other 4 individuals who were in the tunnel. All this occurred about 2 hours after they were first observed entering the tunnel. This tunnel was about 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet. It's got concrete lining. It's an old gas line, and they said it was just, there's water in there also, so they had to hold their head above the water in order to breathe. It was so narrow they couldn't back up, so they had to keep coming forward. And they were evaluated by paramedics at the scene. None required any extensive medical attention. None had to go to the hospital. Once again, I said it was 4 males, adult males, and 1 adult female. They were then transported to a local Border Patrol station where they will be processed.
So what does this say about, are we seeing an increase, or are they more risky?
Well, sure. This is tunneling activity is something we've seen an increase in as we've made our land borders more secure. The criminal smuggling organizations have resorted to other methods to come into the country, whether it be by maritime incursions or tunneling activity. Prior to this tunnel, we've had 41 tunnels discovered in the San Diego sector, 41 cross-border tunnels, I should say. And of those, only 2 were discovered prior to 9/11. After those events, when we really stepped up the security here on the border, we've seen an increase in that tunneling activity. I don't know the hazmat crews were called in. I wasn't aware of that, but I know there was water. We weren't sure what was in that tunnel. We do have a small robot, a little mechanism that has a camera on it, which we deployed into that tunnel to try to see how wide it was, to see if there was anyone else in there. There were some other obstructions in there, so I don't believe it was able to go the whole length of the tunnel. The tunnel itself is about 100 meters.
And their attempted passage into the United States was prior negotiated?
Right. So this is an organized smuggling event. Somebody that was interviewed stated that one of the people we apprehended stated that they made arrangements to pay $5,000 to be smuggled in.
$5,000 a person?
That person made arrangements to pay $5,000 for that individual alone. So there is an ongoing investigation. We always attempt to identify who the people are involved with the smuggling event, who the smugglers are themselves. They would face criminal charges for alien smuggling. So as I said, people are still being interviewed to determine if we have apprehended the foot guide as part of these 5 people.
Can you tell me a little bit about this location? These Arctic containers, this government property, or is this?
Sure, thanks. I'm not sure of this location. I know there are a lot of warehouses here. Some of this is an Otay Mesa, but some of these areas might be leased. Some are privately owned, where these warehouses are.
And about this hole, how old is this hole? And has there ever been any, that you know of any, people coming up through this hole before?
I don't know in this hole in particular if this one has been used, but this is an area that has been popular for tunneling activity. Last November, there were two sophisticated tunnels which were discovered not too far from here, in which many narcotics were seized. So it is an area that the criminal smuggling organizations have used before for tunneling activity.
I'm going to have to ask you really quickly, is this a drug? I know we're jumping in a little late, but was any drugs found that are just repeat that?
No, this group, the people only were apprehended. No narcotics were detected in this tunnel.
But they did admit to smuggling?
One of the persons that was interviewed admitted that they made arrangements for $5,000 to be paid to the smuggling organization that was leading them there through this tunnel.
How long has this tunnel been here, and how does a tunnel like this go unblocked?
Well, I was informed that this is a gas line that's no longer in use. I don't know when those lines were installed, and I'm not sure if they, when they entered that manhole, if they dug another tunnel to break into that gas line tunnel.
How long will you be out here?
As far as agents,
Monitoring the
there are always agents nearby who will be monitoring the area, and arrangements will be made to fill in that tunnel eventually.
Is this a sewer line, or what kind of tunnel is this exactly? Can you
As I
describe
said, it's a gas line, from what I was told. It's no longer being used. It's about 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet inside of it. There is concrete lining in there, but it's still such a narrow passageway that the people couldn't walk or crawl through. They pretty much had to just shimmy their way through. So although it's about 100 yards, they said it took about 2 hours for them to travel that 100 yards.
And can you talk about the desperation of people willing to crawl through essentially sewage and mud?
Well, many times these people are lied to. What it really shows is the disregard for the people's safety, for their lives that these criminal smuggling organizations show. All they care about is profit, about making money. And many times they won't tell the people the true dangers that they may face. So that's something that we find commonly, where somebody may be told a hike might take a few hours, and then they find they're going for days without any water or food. So that's what this shows.
What exactly is on the other side of this tunnel here?
You're saying on the other side, and
Where they entered?
where they entered, I was told there was a manhole that's in the middle of the street where they observed going into that manhole. We knew that we should be looking in this area north because they're likely going to be trying to use that to enter the country.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Sure.